I want to start off by just thanking you for being part of the ministry of Chalmers Community Church, especially the part of ministry where we care for our children and our youth. At Chalmers, we believe that these individuals are so important, and that they're not only the next generation of our church, but that they are our church today. And so, as individuals, as parents, as friends, we want to make sure that we are caring for our children and youth well. And so at Chalmers, we have a policy called the Plan to Protect. And in the series of these videos, we're going to be going through some of the highlights of the Plan to Protect in order to make sure that you're aware of and are following this policy. It's the policy of Chalmers Community Church to provide a safe environment for everyone involved in our church-related activities. That goes from the oldest to the youngest. To do this, we want to create a safe environment. To create that safe environment, we will guard against any form of abuse, and we have a zero tolerance against abuse. We will screen and train all ministry personnel working with children and youth. We will protect our ministry personnel from false allegations of abuse, and we will report any allegations or suspicions of abuse to the appropriate authorities. We want to make sure that as you're volunteering in the ministry of your choice, that you are protected, that you are cared for. We also want to make sure that we make sure that the kids are cared for as well. And so on the one hand, we are protecting the kids, and on the other hand, we want to protect our volunteers. Now, in order to protect our children and to help our volunteers, we want to take a few minutes and define abuse. Abuse is any action causing undue physical, emotional, or sexual harm, which includes the misuse of power by anyone in authority. Even in that definition, we can tell that there are a few different ways that abuse happens: physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, neglect. We're going to touch on each one of these just for a few seconds. Physical abuse is defined as any deliberate physical force or action that results or could result in injury to a child. It can include punching, slapping, beating, shaking, burning, biting, or throwing a child. And physical abuse is different than reasonable discipline would be. Obviously, those things that we talked about, throwing a child, biting a child, burning a child, beating a child, those things are far beyond what any reasonable parent or disciplinarian would do to a child. Sexual abuse is another form of abuse that we need to be aware of and to be watching for the signs of. Sexual abuse occurs when a child is used for the sexual gratification of an adult or an older child. Coercion, so physical, psychological, or emotional coercion, is usually intrinsic to sexual abuse. This is what distinguishes sexual abuse from sexual exploration with peers. Now, it is against the law to touch a child for any sexual purpose, to encourage or to force a child to touch another person in a sexual way, to encourage or force a child to participate in any sexual activity, or to tell the child to touch him or herself for an adult or an older child's sexual purposes. Emotional abuse is a third form of abuse. Emotional abuse is a pattern of behavior that attacks a child's emotional development and sense of self-worth. It includes excessive, aggressive, or unreasonable demands that place expectations on a child beyond his or her capacity. Emotional abuse includes constantly criticizing, teasing, belittling, insulting, rejecting, ignoring, or isolating the child. It also includes failure of a parent or a caregiver to provide for their child's emotional needs with love, emotional support, and guidance. At Chalmers, we want to maintain and provide an upbuilding community. We want to make sure that as we care for our children, that we are building them up emotionally as well as spiritually. Now, there's a fourth type of abuse that has just become noticed in the last few years, and this is called neglect. Now, neglect is the passive form of abuse. Neglect is the failure to meet a child's basic needs for food, clothing, shelter, sleep, medical attention, education, and protection from harm. This can occur when parents don't know how to appropriately take care of children, or when they cannot adequately supervise their child. Now at Chalmers, we want to not only make sure that that children aren't abused within our care, but we also want to make sure that we're protecting children and giving children a safe place to share if there is abuse happening in other places in their lives. And so, as volunteers, as ministry personnel at Chalmers Community Church, we want you to be aware of these abuses, these forms of abuse. We also want you to be keeping an eye out for these types of abuse. Not that you need to be looking everywhere, but that when you do see a form of abuse, when you do hear someone say something that might signal that they are being abused, that you would be able to take the right steps. And we're going to talk about what those steps are in a later video. But at this point, I just want to take a few seconds to talk about the symptoms of abuse. Church members and ministry personnel need to be able to recognize and report physical behaviors or verbal signs that are manifesting that there is abuse. Their physical signs might look like lacerations or bruises on a child that aren't consistent with play. We know that every child gets bruises on their knees or on their elbows, and those are just because they are playing and they're falling down. But what this means is that there are some children that have bruises or lacerations on their body that are inconsistent of play. So for example, a burn mark that looks like the form of a spoon, or a handprint on a child's back, or a belt strap. These type of things are physical signs of abuse. There may also be unexplained irritation, pain, or injury on their private areas that they're sensitive to and that they're talking about, discomfort when they're sitting. They may also have things like nightmares that aren't easily explained. On top of the physical signs, there are also behavioral signs, like anxiety when approaching a certain area. And so if, for example, there has been abuse within a church setting, there might be anxiety when coming to a nursery or a church setting. They may be nervous or hostile towards some adults. They may be sexually self-conscious, or they may be acting out in sexual behaviors that are beyond their years. On top of all these signs, there are also verbal signals. When someone says something like, "This person does something to me when we're alone," or I don't like being alone with so-and-so. These are signs that we need to be aware of, and if we do see signs of abuse, we need to be able to take the appropriate measures in order to report and to follow up on those.